award for science company. He's also given lectures at Punjab University and National Institute of Public Policy. He serves as a member of Punjab Scientific Council and has participated in several national dialogues on boundary water government. And he also done research on groundwater and boundary water at Villa Institute, Chapel House, and City. He's also engaged very well.
About an hour, and I wanted to this morning give a brief introduction of Islamic science and water law. And I talked about this because it's very little about science and water law. But the effort today is trying to locate. Remember, my lecture yesterday, big question was fundamental question to ask yourself when looking at water is where is it and who improve? And that's the overall asking. Where in the structure of our federal government or federal form of government is water located and who is responsible for it and how? That's the effort. Or think of it another way. There was a question yesterday about the national water policy. So perhaps there would be a time to ask who would be responsible for the transportation policy where the inputs come from. We have to locate the waterways in the federal system. About the provinces and the local governments. Also clear where the responsibilities lie, with a better understanding perhaps of where the policy should come from nearby. And as with yesterday's introduction, I can't stress how much any appreciation of water is really an appreciation of the history and culture of the place you're studying. I've done a lot of work on cities, urban infrastructure, and cities are interesting because it's all very modern and technology driven, computers and internet. So when you're studying water, it's a different deal of speed you have to understand water. What impacts culture, what impacts society, and it's much slower. We have to have an appreciation of who we are and where we come from. So this is a picture of the canal irrigation network in India, Punjab, more or less. I won't get technical details of this because far more experienced person than I have already occupied in school. But what I want to talk about is the talk. I want to go straight to the constitution of Pakistan and ask where is the legal system or the federal system is water located. Interestingly, the word water crops up maybe 3 or 4 times in the text of the constitution. It's also here in Article 9. No person shall be deprived of the right of liberty save in accordance with law. Of course, the word water is mentioned in the text of Article 9, so you might be misled. But it's the Supreme Court and the Superior Court of Pakistan have repeatedly introduced and widened the concept of Article 9, the right of life, to include, for example, in the Sheikh case, the right of life, saying that the right of life included the right to a clean and healthy environment. Then you have the salt mines case of the 1990s, where the Supreme Court said further, it said that the right to have unpolluted water is the right of every person wherever he lives in the ocean. And then there are some other judgments as well regarding the concept of public trust, which I mentioned in yesterday's class. And the main case for that is this Urology Institute versus Nestle Milk. Nestle was setting up a bottled watering plant. And this medical institution sued it. The Sindh High Court observed that no civilized society should permit the unfettered exploitation of its natural resources, particularly with respect to water. These are within the meaning of Article 9, the 3 or 4 cases that we also need to find out how the courts treat water. The courts water as a fundamental right, but they only treat drinking water as clean drinking water as a fundamental right. Please note that this right does not go as far as to say farmers have the right to water. It doesn't go that far. We can all question whether it should or not. But let me say this. If we were to do that exercise, if we were to say that everyone has the right to water, then it would become a very tricky exercise in virtual water to determine what is fair and what is not fair. Should we be exporting rice? Should we be wearing clothes, cotton clothes? These will become part of the fundamental rights discourse. And that perhaps is too complicated that way. So the definition of the right to life just includes clean drinking water. What I'm going to do next is I divided the presentation into three sections broadly. We're going to study where water exists in the federal laws or the federation up in Islamabad, and then we're going to discuss briefly, because there's so many of them, provincial legislation regarding water, and just times local government laws regarding water as well. And you will see that in each tier of government, or each tier of the state, different responsibilities have been handed out. So, what is this federalism that I'm talking about this morning? Pakistan is a federation. It's a federation of 4 separate federated units, 4 provinces. And these, in turn, shape the federation, the federal government, the Islamabad government. And there are different ways of looking at this form. But our constitution sets out pretty clearly, after the 18th Amendment, what Islamabad is capable of doing and what the provinces are capable of doing. So in Article 97 of the Constitution says that, subject to the Constitution, the executive authority of the Federation, that's the power of Islamabad Union, shall extend to matters with respect to which Parliament has the power to make laws. So the federal government can only do things that it has the power to make laws about. And provinces, like Article 137 says, the executive authority of the provinces shall extend to matters with respect to which the provincial assembly may make laws. So our constitution makes clear that this is the division between what the federation in Islamabad is supposed to do and what the federated units and the provinces are capable of doing. So Islamabad can only make laws with respect. The executive authority of the federation extends only to those subjects to which Parliament can make laws, and the executive authority of the provinces extends to those subjects over which provincial assemblies may make laws. That said, after the 18th Amendment, there are situations where, emergency situations, extraneous situations, where provincial governments, provincial assemblies may request the federation to make laws. So this is where the provincial section, or the provincial part of this 3-tier form of government that we have, requests an upper tier to make a law. And this says, if one or more provincial assemblies pass resolutions to the effect that Parliament may make a law regulating matters not enumerated in the federal legislative list, that's the list of subjects that Parliament may make laws on. In the 4th schedule, it should be lawful for Parliament to pass an act regulating that matter. So the Constitution allows for provinces or provincial assemblies to request Islamabad to make laws on certain types of subjects that Islamabad would otherwise not have the power to make laws on. And so this is the extent of executive authority, the power of the federation and the power of the provinces. Oh, I should just point out, in the first line of Article 144, it says if one or more provincial assemblies pass resolutions. So now the trigger for the request to Islamabad to make laws is the threshold of one provincial assembly passing a resolution requesting Islamabad to make laws. I put a bracket around the word one because this is the text of the Constitution after the 18th Amendment. Before the 18th Amendment, it used to say if all of the provincial assemblies. So all of the provincial assemblies had to make a request to the federation before it made the law. The 18th Amendment has watered that threshold down. There is they have to make a request. Now it's one to make a request for the federation to make law, Parliament to make law. And this is how the 18th Amendment has done a change in how the federal authority or the power of the federation 42, which is the subject matter of federal and provincial laws set out in the Constitution. On the left is how that article stood before the 18th Amendment, and on the right is the text of the amendment as it stands after the 18th. So the big differences you'll find not in subsection A, where you read that Parliament will have exclusive power to make laws with respect to any matter enumerated in the federal legislation. So Parliament can pass a law on any subject set out in this thing called the federal legislation. It's a subject, it's a list of about, say, 35 different subjects: railways, defense, currency, coinage, foreign policy, treaties, so on and so forth. The responsibilities you expect the federal government to have, or Parliament to have. So that hasn't changed before or after the 18th Amendment. What has changed is sub-article B, which says that Parliament will use Parliament and the provincial assembly will also have power to make laws with respect to any matter in the concurrent legislation. Now here I want to stop with this make a sort of historical aside. As I said, understanding this has to take away with history. The structure of our federation comes from what has derived, you could say, its history from the Government of India Act 1935. The Government of India Act 1935 was the Constitution of India before Pakistan. It was also the operating constitution of Pakistan after partition, until the promulgation of Pakistan's first constitution. So what we have now, the design of the system, the historical architecture of the system follows the colonial system, or a colonial base. You must remember that one of the great claims through the freedom movement, both for the Indian Congress and for Muslim League, is that the states of India, of United India, should have power to control their own destiny. At that time, the British colonial government was incredibly centralized, with all of India being governed out of New Delhi, and then by extension out of Whitehall and through London. This was done by an incredibly centralized form of control, where London and Delhi exercised more or less jurisdiction over subjects and legislation throughout India. This led to a cry. One of the claims of the independence movement was that the state should have their own powers to make their own laws. Yeah, we know best what to do in Maharashtra, we know best what to do in Assam, we know best what to do in Punjab. Allow us to make our own laws. The system the English had evolved was a system of lists, this federal list and a concurrent list, where the English said, all right, we're going to concede some of these claims for the states and their independence through their legislation. We'll have a list of subjects that New Delhi can pass laws on, and we will have a list of subjects that the provinces can pass laws, or the states can pass laws on as well. However, and this is the important however, and that is what Article 3 is. New Delhi would say that New Delhi can not only pass laws with respect to what all of India or New Delhi can pass laws on, but also what states can pass on. So it's, in essence, the central government was exercising legislative control not only over the federal government but also over the states. That Parliament and the provincial assembly both shall have powers to make laws with respect to a part of the country. See how it's changed on the right-hand side over here after the 18th Amendment. That Parliament and the provincial assembly shall have power to make laws only with respect to criminal law, criminal procedure, and evidence. If I invite your attention to subject C here on the right, it says the provincial assembly shall, and Parliament shall not have powers to make laws with respect to any matter not enumerated in the federal legislation. This is the big stern of the 18th Amendment. It says the powers of the federal government are now limited. They are only limited to those subjects listed in the federal list. There is no more extension of jurisdiction of legislative powers that the Federation has on any other subject. From now on, only provinces can make subjects that are outside the federal legislation. So the power to make provincial laws has been handed over to the provinces. And you can put this into a historical arc as well, and I can put forward and say that this has been long-standing demand of the provinces and the states to have independent legislative powers finally granted to them under the 18th Amendment. So now provinces can make laws on subjects outside the federal list, and the federal list is you could say, it's an inclusive list of subjects, about 35 in number, that federal government can make laws on. And so this is how our federation works. This is how responsibilities between Islamabad and the provincial and the provinces are divided. They are divided on the basis of this legislative list division. There are some provisions in the Constitution regarding interprovincial matters. Because obviously for 4 provinces, or if you aggregate Pakistan, how should these units cooperate amongst each other? And so the Constitution sets out this forum called the Council of Common Interest that includes the Prime Minister, the 4 Chief Ministers, and 3 members of federal government. And they're responsible to Parliament. The functions of the Council shall be specifically to formulate and regulate policies in relation to matters listed in Part 2 of the federal legislative list. And this is a list of subjects like natural resources, minerals, which are found all over the federation. Any policy over which should have the input of all 4 provinces. And so the Constitution allows for this mechanism where the 4 provinces can come together and talk about subjects that are enumerated in the Part 2 of the federal legislative list. For example, subject number 3 of Part 2 of the federal legislative list says that the Council of Common Interests may look at and examine, for instance, the development of industries, where development is under federal control, declared by federal law to be expedient in the public interest, institutions, establishments, and so on, including, and I've underlined here, the Pakistan Water and Power Development Authority. And so, through this text, the Council of Common Interests can set policy with respect to water as far as the Water and Power Development Authority is concerned. The Council of Common Interest also has a unique jurisdiction to adjudicate complaints on water resources that may arise between the provinces. It says here that in the interest of a province, the federal capital or the federally administered tribal areas, or any of the inhabitants thereof, and the water from any natural resource or supply or reservoir has been or is likely to be affected prejudicially by any executive act or legislation taken or passed or proposed to be taken or passed, or the failure of the authority to exercise any of its powers with respect to the use and distribution or control over water from that source, then the federal government or provincial government concerned may make a complaint in writing to the council. So the council may receive these complaints, and after having considered the matter, either give its decision or request the President to appoint a commission consisting of such persons having special knowledge and experience in irrigation, engineering, administration, finance, or law as he may think fit, hereinafter referred to the commission. And the Commission, after investigating and submitting its report back to the Council of Common Interest, the Council should report its decision on all matters referred to the Commission. So this one article sets out how provinces may resolve any water-related disputes that they may have. It may go to the Council of Common Interest. If it's technically complicated, a commission may be constituted, and the Commission's recommendations may be considered by the Council of Common Interest. As far as I know, this article has never been exercised in the history of Pakistan. Always wrong on every single meeting of the Council of Common Interest. It's a different issue that the meetings don't take place, or that the agenda is put aside to some exit. That's not the point. But it's indicative to see what's the priority of the Council of Common Interest is in terms of its agenda. Going further into the Constitution, we find mention of water in Article 163. This is a very interesting provision, I'll submit, which talks about how the net profits earned by the federal government or any undertaking established or administered by the federal government from the bulk generation of power at a hydroelectric station shall be paid to the province in which the hydroelectric station is situated. This is the manner in which the Constitution conceives of the division of net hydropower profits between the provinces. For the purposes of this clause, and this is also very interesting, net profit shall be computed by deducting and the revenue accruing from the bulk supply of power from the bus bars of the hydroelectric station at a rate to be determined by the Council of Common Interest. So, the net profits are to be calculated by the Council of Common Interest. The Council of Common Interest, incidentally, one adjudication regarding this article. It was an arbitration between VARTA and KPK, where KPK made a claim for hydroelectric net profits from VARTA over the course from 1977 to 1992. And they did so on the basis of the net profit formula that had been approved by the Council of Common Interest. They made a claim of approximately 600 billion rupees. What I found very interesting, and this judgment is online, I'll share it with the organizers, that VARTA in return made a counterclaim. Rafay Singh Baba करते, it's वो तो जवाब देते ये तो उन्होंने वो हर जवाब दिया थे, higher counterclaim saying नहीं, we don't owe you 600 billion, you owe us 400 billion because of accounting tax. So the spread between the two claims was nearly $1 trillion rupees, 600 billion, $1 billion and 400 billion. All coming out of the same balance sheet and all coming out of the same formula. This would show me as a lawyer that the formula isn't accurate. Because if two parties can get together with the same figures and the same formula and come up with $1 trillion spread on a claim, then something is wrong with the formula. Here I think also many a dispute between provinces also arises. There is a fantastic bit of research by Dr. Rafay Ahmed, who I believe will be speaking tomorrow on hydropower benefit sharing in Pakistan. And he suggests various different ways of looking at how hydropower can be shared. Over here, for instance, the article in text of the Constitution says that the net profit shall be made to the province in which the hydroelectric station is situated. So take Calabar, for example, where is the hydropower station situated and where will the water reservoir be situated? Look at Hub, for instance. Water is one place, the station is another place. So this was written in 1973. The formula was put forward in 1991. The claim that was adjudicated in 2005 indicates that the formula and perhaps this article are too vague to give that certainty to provinces to be able to trust one another. If hydropower benefits were transparently and well elaborated, I would doubt that Sindh would have a problem with hydropower benefit sharing if it could accurately determine on the basis of a formula what it would receive from the power cost. Not on the basis of the formula that is vague enough for lawyers to be able to make a hash of it. That's where water is situated in the Constitution. That's the only part of the Constitution where there is any mention of water. I'm just going to talk now of some federal laws, some laws that have been passed that operate on the level of the Federation of Islamabad and all of Pakistan. There are only 3 or 4 of them. First is the VARTA Act, the Water and Power Development Authority Act of 1958. We're all familiar with VARTA. Article 2 sets out the powers, the general powers of the authority. The general powers are to develop and utilize water and power resources throughout Pakistan. This incidentally includes groundwater, anywhere where it may be in Pakistan. So VARTA is a federal institution made by Parliament, by an Act of Parliament, the policies of which can be determined by the Council of Common Interests. So water is a subject. If the policies, federal policies of water are ever determined, they have to be determined by the Council of Common Interests, which ensures the participation of the 4 provinces through their chief ministers, and so the policy has democratic representation. The VARTA Act goes further to say that subject to the provisions of VARTA shall have control over underground water resources, the operation of powerhouses, grids, including any such ancillary works as may be considered necessary. Interestingly, if you look at subclause 2 at the bottom, it says that the Quality Authority exercises any control under clause 1 of subsection 1, that is, control over underground water resources, or exercising control over underground water resources. The area over which and the extent to which control is intended to be exercised shall be agreed to and notified by the government in the official gazette. So every time VARTA, as a federal entity, wants to undertake any operation on groundwater, it has to get permission to do so from the law. And again, the democratic representation between the powers of the Federation and what the province allows are somewhat kept in balance to these provisions. Another very interesting... Sir?
We can have a discussion.
Yes. Another very interesting federal legislation is the IRSA Accord and the IRSA, the Water Enforcement Accord and the IRSA Act. Now, I saw yesterday with some elaborate detail about the history of the Accord and of IRSA. So I won't go into any great detail over here. Safe to say that the duties and powers of the authority are set out in the Act. And for instance, subsection 6.1a says that IRSA shall lay down the basis of regulation and distribution of surface waters amongst the provinces according to the allocation of policies set out in the Water Accord. And that is the job of IRSA. It looks after the management of the surface waters coming into and dividing into the provinces. And lastly, I think the last federal act on water is this interesting property legislation called the Easements Act. You wouldn't think of finding water-related provisions here, but this is a gift from our, again, English colonial history and legacy. So an easement is a right over someone else's land. I mean, you must have heard many times when someone tries to build a plaza next to a residential accommodation, one of the claims made is getting our privacy, our parda is being violated. If you have this right of privacy, if you think about it, is not on your land, but on the other fellow's land. The property is being you're telling him what to do on his land. So an easement is a right that you have on someone else's land to tell them what you can and can't do on their property. So quite interesting properties are property rights. But Section 7 of the Easements Act says that easements, this right over other properties, are restrictions on one of the other following rights, including the right of every owner of land to collect and dispose within his own limits of all water under the land which does not pass in a defined time. So it's saying that Zameen ke niche jo pani hai, it's the property of the person who owns the land above. If it's not showing a defined chapter, whatever that is. So it's a very interesting comment that we today, these academic resource, the French academic resource. The fact that existing rules get derived with the English case law is not surprising. The Easements Act is from 1882, so case law in 1880s tak kari. So this is a law from there. It's not surprising since the rules were developed in the 19th century. What is more surprising is that the rules were never adapted to vastly different climatic conditions prevailing in India, whose climate includes arid and semi-arid tropical areas, tropical and subtropical rainy areas, with only a small part of the country having climate conditions comparable to England. Further, these rules were never adapted to completely different patterns of water use, for instance, with regards to irrigation, accounting for the overwhelming share of water use. Is it fair to say that in a country of 200 million people, most of whom get their drinking water from the ground, that their right to water is limited only by their ownership of land? That's a complicated part. Here we have to look at these federal laws and the history of what we have, because this Easements Act is very troubling. It is a jurisdictional overlap. It's a personal property right over land, which is a jurisdictional overlap with what local governments and development authorities have control over groundwater. So वासा के ऊपर एक कानून कहता है वासा का हक है, एक और कानून कहता है कि वो मालकी जमीन का. So these are interesting conflicts that arise when examining this. So that's about all when it comes to federal legislation regarding water in this respect. I'm just going to quickly go over some of the provincial legislation. Because water is, I should mention, not listed in the federal legislation. The word water is not in the federal legislation. So after the 18th Amendment, the federal government, the Parliament, have no executive authority or authority to pass laws on the subject of water. So it primarily is a provincial subject. So you'll find irrigation and drainage acts in all the 4 provinces. You'll find also, and I don't want to go into the details of the irrigation and drainage acts, safe to say that they're not rights-based legislation. In farmers ko hak nahi dete, they give farmers entitlements. As Rao Sahib explained yesterday, it's a system based on subsistence and on flood irrigation. So it doesn't conceive of these concepts of rights as a lawyer would be familiar with. What are interesting in terms of provincial legislation, sometimes you find things such as the Balochistan Groundwater Administration Ordinance. It's the only groundwater specific law in Pakistan. And things such as the Punjab Soil Reclamation Act. which are other ways the government controls soil conditions and water tables in the province. Then also, very importantly, other than the Irrigation and Drainage Acts, are the Provincial Environment Protection Laws. These also, after the 18th Amendment, have taken on new meaning because the subject of environment is not listed in the federal legislative list, which means the subject of environment control and pollution is exclusively one of the provinces. And all four provinces after the 18th Amendment have passed their own post-18th Amendment legislations, all of which prohibit the discharge of domestic and industrial effluents in excess of provincial environmental quality standards. With that said, I should also point out that in KPA and in Balochistan, there are extensive provisions in the new legislation with respect to water resources in specific. The legislation now says that with respect to water resources, the EPA has a further mandate to require the governments to come up with conservation plans. So this is an interesting development after the 18th Amendment. I just want to mention one point of the Punjab Canal and Drainage Act. It has to do with groundwater. If you look at the Punjab Canal and Drainage Act, Section 5 of it says that the provincial government may notify, wherever it's expedient to the provincial government that any subsoil water be applied or used by the provincial government for any existing or projected canal, the government may declare that such groundwater or subsoil water be applied. So this legislation gives the Irrigation Department, you could say, through the Punjab Canal and Drainage Act, the ability to execute schemes over subsoil water. So whenever they wanted to, they could exercise control over subsoil water. However, in the 2000s, an amendment was made to the Irrigation Canal and Drainage Act through the addition of Section 62A. This reads specifically that the provincial government shall take necessary steps for the proper management of the subsoil water to protect the aquifer, the quality and availability of such water. Now this law extends to all of Punjab, and it gives the Irrigation Department the responsibility, Government of Punjab through the Irrigation Department, the responsibility of all aquifers through the Punjab. Not just aquifers or groundwater linked to canals, which is one of the institutional responsibilities they have, but now the aquifers throughout Punjab. This is an interesting increase in responsibility. This is the Punjab Soil Reclamation Act that I mentioned. This is a legislation that allows the state to control groundwater salinity by providing restrictions, creating a board that can implement schemes and have restrictions on irrigation practices. The Balochistan Groundwater Rights Administration Act is the only groundwater-specific legislation in Pakistan. It's also because Balochistan has a unique groundwater situation. Water is scarce throughout Balochistan, and this legislation was a means to protect the old Kare system of water supply. For reasons of time, I'm not going to read the text, but this is the statement of reasons for the legislation provided for when it was passed by the Balochistan Assembly in 1978. So I'm coming to the last couple of slides so we can have some questions. Lastly, we have some local government legislation in all four provinces as well. And for reasons of time, I understand I'm going to be Punjabi-centric, but I'm going to stay with the Punjab local government provinces and not talk about how water is dealt with other provinces in other local governments. Safe to say that, by and large, mechanism 8. Local governments come to our constitution through Article 40A of the constitution, which says that each province shall establish a local government and devolve political, administrative, and financial responsibility and authority to it. This is very interesting because the constitution creates three tiers of government. There's the federal government, there's the provincial government, and then there are local governments. Federal government के हवाले से it gives you elaboration कि president कौन होना चाहिए, what the prime minister should be, what the national assembly is, what the senate is, कानून किस तरह बनेगा, how budget is passed. For provincial assemblies, it tells you the government is going to be, the chief minister is going to be, how the assembly is going to function, how bills are going to be passed. For local governments, however, all we have is these three lines. That provincial governments shall, by law, establish local governments and hand over power. So the question of what local governments will look like, whether they'll have presidents or assemblies or how they'll make bills, that is entirely, it appears, subject to the discretion of each province. So you can't have the same principle regarding local government. It's an interesting sort of point of our constitution. That said, under the Punjab local government ordinance, there is 3 tiers of local government: district level, tehsil level, and union council level. At the district level, the council is to review the development of the integrated system of water resources. At the town or tehsil level, the TMA is to provide and maintain and improve municipal infrastructure, including water supply, and control and development of water resources. And at the union council level, union councils are to provide and maintain public sources of drinking water. That's about as far as the legislation goes. It doesn't talk about control or enforcement or levying of any fines or fees. We have to look at development authority legislation there. So in some of our cities in Punjab, we have the Lahore Development Authority, we have the Faisabad and Multan Development Authorities, the Rawalpindi Development Authority. These development authorities also have jurisdiction over water supply in their controlled areas. And these development authorities have the exclusive right to use groundwater in the area under their control, and may give permission to install tube wells for commercial purposes and charge a fee for them. So if you take Lahore, for instance, the Lahore Development Authority, whose jurisdiction extends to the entire Lahore division, technically under this law, only the Lahore Development Authority may sink a tube well in Lahore division. Now, how do you think that sits with the irrigation department in the Lahore division that has tube wells? This is, when you get into the fine text of the law, is section 192 में जाकर के वहाँ आपको ये छोटा सा overlap नजर आना शुरू करता है. And here we can see that there is sometimes in how our laws have been set up, this is not by design, this could be historical accident, that there is not clarity of responsibility from the provinces to the local governments when it comes to water. Now there may be reasons for this. It could be that local governments don't have the capacity to be able to deal with water supply at this point. अगर आपकी एरिया को इस वक्त आज पूरी जिम्मेदारी उठा के देते हैं, they don't have the budget, the ONM to be able to provide adequate services to people. So we have to keep our democratic and revolution instincts in check against the responsibility of this devolving political, administrative, and financial powers. And I think that's the heart of Article 48 of the Constitution that provides for local government. So that, everyone, is my quick and short summary of where the law of water exists at the 3 levels in Pakistan. We have a few moments, I think, for questions and answers. Thank you very much. Yes.
Please introduce yourself first.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having such clarification of the different laws regarding water. Two further clarifications. One is my name is Dr. Muhammad Jalil from Punjab Irrigation Department. Regarding the after 18th amendment, there is no word of water. But above that, there are many words of water. How this I will clarify one thing. Second thing is, when we say the Water Act, this clear first section is regarding the water management, and at the end we have water has authority to manage anywhere it becomes critical. Similarly, it's already in like 62 is actually same wording is there. Any area will become critical, or the notification will prohibit installation of the area. I mean, how these federal and provincial, then they have the same wording. The area is same. Federal government don't have any area working. Area is the provinces. How do these acts act under that they have complete
I don't have a conclusive answer. It's a very good question. Thank you, sir. It's because the 18th Amendment is so fresh and it's so different that these legal questions haven't properly been answered. आपने बताया सवाल पूछा वापडा के बारे में, because it contains the word water, and you asked whether वापडा has. I mean, I can answer with वापडा. वापडा may exercise that authority because under the Council of Common Interest, the Council of Common Interest may set policy with respect to वापडा. So that may set the policy on groundwater. Those terms are legally covered. But let me take another example of Employees Old Age Benefit Institution, EOBI. It's a social security labor-related institution that was set up by the federal government before the 18th Amendment. After the 18th Amendment, the subject of labor has devolved to the provinces. And so a question did arise regarding the management of EOBI, or EOBI management is a controversial, or I won't say controversial, it's very lucrative because EOBI has huge investments in property. So it's a very rich organization. So after the 18th Amendment, a dispute broke out over who was going to control the EOBI and its assets, whether it would be the provinces or whether the EOBI would continue to exist as it had done after the 18th Amendment. This is the Senate Star Judgment of 2013 of the Lahore High Court, where the Lahore High Court quite conclusively said that the 18th Amendment ends the federal jurisdiction and executive authority of EOBI, and that certain transitory provisions of the Constitution make this a responsibility in all the provinces. However, my latest update is that that case was appealed, and the Supreme Court has stayed the order and has not yet given its final decision. So again, the 18th Amendment is so fresh that these sort of conclusive legal decisions have not yet been determined. And so it's a vast grey area where these responsibilities are going to fall, not just with respect to water, but also with respect to the environment. With respect to climate change, I mean, I referenced the forum yesterday, and also mentioned that our federal cabinet has approved a federal climate change authority, which may or may not be good news, because the word climate change does not appear in the federal legislative list. Whereas most of the problems regarding climate change in Pakistan have to do with flooding and irrigation, which are essentially provincial subjects. So shouldn't the provinces have, therefore, strong and robust climate policies after the 18th Amendment, rather than depending back on the federal government as it had been in the past? And surely the 18th Amendment must mean something different for the provinces on how they work and operate the responsibilities that they have. And this has yet to be clarified, both in terms of law and also in terms of how our elections lead different governments.
My name is Arjun Salam and I'm a journalist. Could you just explain a little bit when you mentioned that provincial legislation is not rights-based but entitlement-based? What do you think of that?
Very good question. A quick answer to you. As lawyers, we look to things in terms of rights and obligations. What is our right? And we can say that we have a right gives us a remedy. If our right is violated, we have a forum to ask either for damages or compensation for that right to be violated, for that right having been violated, or we can ask for that right to be rectified through the performance of obligations by another party. The system of canal water entitlements is not one of the rights. The water comes to farmers, yet the law does not give them a specific right. So they can't say that if this doesn't happen, I can sue someone. It doesn't give them rights in the sense that there's a platform for them to pursue that way. There are no clear demarcations of legal rights. I wish I could explain this better. Perhaps my effort for the next London's WIT would be to address this issue of what it is.
Thank you, sir. I'm Amish Shizad from London, and I'm a student of Masters in Electrical Engineering. So my question is about the community water management. As we have seen, it's integrated successfully in Switzerland, in North American countries, in South American countries. So why is it not included in 18th Amendment specifically?
Well, let me see, and lots of places are wrong, that we do have laws in place. The Provincial Irrigation and Drainage Authority Acts, which Punjab Irrigation and Drainage Authority since KD. So PDAP, for example. These were laws that were brought in the 1990s that attempted to devolve the control of the management of canals to farmers' organizations and other community-based organizations. It's a different question altogether whether those organizations were successful in being able to manage control of the canals or not. Control of canals is political power. So that question of whether or not those community-based organizations could be transferred such power is still ongoing. Figures are not quite worked. Those community organizations haven't quite worked. So the question of how you get this power from, our federal government exercises power. आपने कानून आईने लेके devolve हो गया इसको, but EOBI is a cash cow. When we had the devolution of the Wabda used to make electricity. It was a completely vertically integrated utility that made electricity and distributed it. So उसको unbundle करके Wabda एक तरफ हो गया, क्योंकि does dams and all the digital sector is supposed to be corporatized through these discos and so on and so forth. But where does power lie still? It still lies in the Ministry of Water and Power. Well, just because you change the system, power appears to defy gravity. The only thing I know that defies the law of gravity, which may be why some of these devolution plans don't work. So change sometimes.
Thank you for your talk. My name is Maya. I have a PhD candidate in anthropology at the University of Chicago. I'm working on environmental physics and water governance. I have two questions, two related points of clarification actually. The first one is, you cited the same High Court case from 2005, let's say, against the SIUT versus Nestle. So I just want to ask, in that case, there are a whole host of government organizations that are party to the case. For instance, the Land Reclamation Department, the Environment Protection Department, etc. But surprisingly, at least for me, the Sindh Irrigation Department is not made a party in the case. So I'm wondering if you can say something about that. How is it possible to have this long litigation without ever involving the one government department which specifically exercises control over groundwater? So that's my first question. The second one is, in my research with bottled water companies, mostly around the Rafay area, when I asked them if they have anything to do with the irrigation department, they always express surprise. They say, no, of course, we're a bottled water company, we have nothing to do with the irrigation department. And interestingly, when I have conversations with officials either in the irrigation department or in other water-related departments, they will say that, oh, we're actually waiting for this, we're waiting for the groundwater policy to be finalized. So I feel like that's a cop-out because there are a whole plethora of laws in place, the ones that you've outlined so comprehensively for us. But I just want to ask, if tomorrow, for instance, the Punjab Irrigation Department decides to levy a tax on groundwater extraction, right? Not just for bottled water companies, but for sugar mills, for everyone. Could you just maybe walk us through the legal steps, like what, just an outline, what will the irrigation department have to do? Which other departments will the irrigation department have to work with if something like this were to be made again?
Longest question. I can't answer the first one because I don't know what happened in that case and why the irrigation department wasn't invited. But I just want to add on to what about bottled water around the city. I mentioned yesterday that I have been invited to the water bottling plant on the outskirts of the city. They were taking out 220 million liters of water from the ground, not paying any concession to the Punjab. So they also gave me their annual audit account. So I took a long time to look at it. And this is a big factory, it also does other products, it has some milk, it has some juices as well. So it posted 93 billion rupees in profit last year after tax, or 2 years ago after tax. And water is maybe third of the business, 30 billion. So what if local governments in that area could levy a 5% tax on the collection of water, with that money going to schools and repair and maintenance of water capacity? Under law, they should be able to do so. At least the development authority with its city, if it was in Bhutan, it could do so. Lahore division may help it do so. So these are interesting areas to think about because these are natural resources. The case law that I cited at the beginning, the Supreme Court and the High Court judgments, are very, very clear about how something like a natural resource like water or groundwater should be used. It can't be used for private or commercial use. It has to be used for public good. And the use that a lot of bottled water companies are putting into this water is clearly in conflict with those provisions. It's just a question of no one has ever brought them up in any way substantially before court. And how would Section 62A roll out if the provincial government decided it wanted to do it? I have no idea. The provincial government will have to look at its resources to see whether institutionally it could have the capacity to set out rules and regulations around what is province and enforce it. Because this is a responsibility that is new to them. Institutionally, it's not something that we do. They're familiar with waterlogging and salinity close to canals. But what about, muddy? Groundwater. That's a completely different factor. It's in the mountains, it's in an aquifer, its management is totally different. So there have to be, most likely, you could say delegated legislation, rules and regulations issued by the government of Punjab